The human metabolic engine is experiencing a catastrophic software glitch. Ultra-processed foods are hacking our neurobiology, and artificial intelligence is now at the center of a silent global health war. Welcome to a special edition of the DJAMGAMIND Daily Rundown. I am your host, Etienne Newman, Senior Software Engineer from Université Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today, we perform a forensic autopsy on the algorithmic hijack of human metabolism. For over 200,000 years, our biology evolved to prioritize energy storage. But today, our environment is flooded with refined carbohydrates and added sugars that dwarf our physiological baseline of just 1 teaspoon of circulating blood glucose. This unregulated input leads directly to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, rewires our dopamine receptors into 5 stages of food addiction, and directly feeds cellular malignancies through the Warburg Effect. Worse, this is an algorithmic arms race. Food conglomerates are deploying machine learning to map human sensory biology and engineer hyper-palatable addiction. In response, health tech is fighting back, using deep learning and continuous glucose monitors to detect metabolic dysfunction years before legacy diagnostics catch the damage. Before we dive into the data, a brief strategic request. The algorithms governing the app you are listening on right now dictate what intelligence reaches your feed. To ensure you never miss our most critical forensic autopsies, please hit follow or subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. It takes just 1 second, but it is the most effective way to help us scale this independent research. Let's unravel the science. Before we begin today's briefing, a note for the brands listening. If you want to reach the true architects of the AI revolution, the technical leaders actually building the stack, not just the tourists, DJAMGAMIND offers select premium partnership opportunities. Let us position your product directly in front of the ultimate technical buyer. Visit jamgamind.com/partners.
Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, like engineering.
Right, yeah.
You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it and says, "Whoa, there it is."
Exactly. It's very binary, broken or not broken.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is comforting. We really like our problems to be visible and easily categorized.
We do, but you step into the world of metabolic health, and that X-ray machine is, it's completely broken. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just entirely murky.
It really is.
So today, we are doing a deep dive, cracking open the clinical data to see what is actually happening to our biology behind the scenes. Because we are currently living through a massive systemic mismatch.
That is the fundamental premise of the modern metabolic crisis. I mean, we have human biological hardware that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to survive resource scarcity.
Right.
It is beautifully designed to prioritize energy storage. But today, that ancient hardware is experiencing what is essentially a catastrophic software glitch.
A software glitch caused by what, exactly?
By a continuous deluge of high-velocity, ultra-processed foods.
Well, yeah.
Just constantly flooding the system.
And the really frustrating part, the reason we need to do this forensic autopsy today, is that legacy healthcare is largely failing us here.
Oh, completely.
It acts almost entirely as a reactionary pharmaceutical-first system. It waits for the downstream symptoms to show up, like obesity or diabetes, and treats those.
While completely ignoring the upstream inputs that are actually driving the cellular degradation in the first place?
Yes, exactly. It's just Band-Aids.
Incredibly expensive Band-Aids. We are applying them to a machine that is fundamentally receiving the wrong fuel code. So if we want to understand this system crash, we first have to quantify the baseline operating parameters of our evolutionary hardware.
Right, and then compare that to the modern dietary inputs we are flooding it with.
Yeah.
But let's unpack that baseline. What is our engine actually designed to handle on a normal day?
Well, let's look at circulating blood glucose. A healthy, non-diabetic adult maintains a circulating blood glucose concentration of about 100 milligrams per deciliter, or 5.6 millimoles per liter.
Okay.
Now, if you take an average human body with a 5-liter blood volume, That tightly regulated homeostatic range represents exactly 4 grams of circulating glucose.
Wait, I want to make sure I'm picturing this correctly. You're telling me our entire 5-liter engine, the whole human cardiovascular system, runs on just 4 grams?
Yes.
Which is exactly what? 1 teaspoon of sugar at any given time?
That is exactly right. 1 single teaspoon dissolved across your entire bloodstream. That is your physiological baseline.
Wow. But hold on, how do standard meals factor into this? Because, standard nutritional advice has told us for decades to base our meals on complex carbohydrates.
Right, the whole food pyramid approach.
Yeah. Bread, pasta, potatoes, rice. If the entire system only holds 1 teaspoon of glucose, what happens to my biology when I eat a massive plate of spaghetti?
So what's fascinating here is how the clinical world is finally waking up to this exact discrepancy. There's a clinical practitioner with the UK's National Health Service, Dr. David Unwin.
Oh, yeah, I've seen his work.
He realized that the standard way we measure food, the glycemic index, was just way too confusing for patients and doctors alike, because many people mistakenly think starches are somehow completely different from table sugar.
Right, they hear complex carbs and think it's healthy.
Exactly. So Dr. Unwin developed a clinical framework that translates common foods directly into teaspoon of sugar equivalents. It just bypasses all that confusion.
Because starches are basically just long chains of glucose, right?
Yeah.
As soon as they hit the digestive enzymes in your saliva and your gut, they get rapidly chopped up into a concentrated stream of pure glucose anyway.
Precisely. They're rapidly cleaved by amylases. So the starch in a baked potato or a bowl of rice is digested so fast it just floods your circulation. Your baseline of 1 single teaspoon is instantly overwhelmed.
Oh.
Yeah, and to protect your blood vessels from the damage of that high sugar, your pancreas is forced to secrete massive amounts of insulin, just to shove that excess glucose out of the bloodstream and into your cells.
So what did Dr. Unwin actually do with this framework? I mean, did it change how he treated his patients?
Dramatically. He applied it at his clinic and literally had his patients swap out the white stuff, so bread, rice, pasta, and potatoes, for nutrient-dense green vegetables, proteins, and healthy fats.
And what happened?
The results were staggering. He saw a 50% drug-free type 2 diabetes remission rate at 30 months for patients on this low-carb protocol.
Wait, 50% remission? Off the drug?
Completely off the drugs. That is incredible. He actually won the NHS Innovator of the Year award for this.
I'm not surprised.
And beyond the biological healing, you have to look at the economics. That single general practice saved roughly £68,000 annually in diabetes-related pharmaceutical costs, just by changing the food inputs.
So if you're listening to this, the takeaway is pretty clear. Treating the root dietary substrate is mathematically and economically superior to a lifetime of managing symptoms with drugs.
Absolutely.
You fix the software input and the hardware heals itself.
It does. But glucose is really only half of the story here.
Right.
While glucose floods the systemic circulation and triggers that massive insulin response, there is another, much stealthier ingredient in our modern diet: fructose.
Ah, yes.
And this brings us to a phenomenon we can call the silent data sink.
I'm glad you brought this up because fructose is the stealth ingredient. When you eat it, it doesn't show up as a massive spike on a standard blood glucose monitor.
No, it doesn't.
So if it's not circulating in the blood like glucose, where does it go?
So fructose has a uniquely pathogenic routing in the body. Unlike glucose, which is distributed across all your cells and regulated, dietary fructose completely bypasses your peripheral circulation.
Okay, so how does it move?
It utilizes specialized transport proteins in your gut, specifically one called GLUT5 and then hepatocyte relocalization via TM4SF5.
That's a lot of letters.
Yeah, think of them as a VIP tunnel. They funnel the fructose straight into the liver via the portal vein.
Okay, so it gets a direct, nonstop flight to the liver. But why is that inherently a bad thing?
Because once inside the liver cells, fructose completely escapes the normal regulatory checkpoints.
What do you mean?
Well, think of normal glucose metabolism like a highly efficient factory assembly line. It's regulated by an enzyme called PFK1. If the warehouse is full and the cell has plenty of high energy, PFK1 hits a stop button on the conveyor belt.
So the cell stops processing glucose.
Exactly. But fructose bypasses PFK1 entirely. An enzyme called ketohexokinase, or KHK, phosphorylates the fructose without any feedback inhibition whatsoever.
So it's like a secondary conveyor belt coming in through a side door, but someone has completely ripped the stop button out of the wall.
That is a highly accurate analogy. Without that feedback inhibition, the liver just rapidly processes the fructose, creating a massive surplus of a molecule called acetyl-CoA.
And what does that do?
That surplus directly drives hepatic de novo lipogenesis, which literally translates to the creation of new fat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The acetyl-CoA becomes malonyl-CoA, then palmitate, and finally triglycerides. It forces your liver to manufacture fat droplets right there inside the organ.
And from what I understand, it's actually a double whammy, right? Not only is it building new fat, but the chemical byproducts of this runaway fructose factory actually block the liver's ability to burn its existing fat.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
That malonyl-CoA we just mentioned, it blocks an enzyme called CPT1. And CPT1 is the doorway to beta oxidation, which is fat burning.
So it forces fat storage and simultaneously locks the door to the furnace.
Exactly. And while all this is happening, the unchecked KHK enzyme depletes the cell's ATP, its basic energy currency, so rapidly that it spikes uric acid,
Which causes inflammation, right?
severe oxidative stress and inflammation in the mitochondria. This is how non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, takes root at a cellular level.
Which raises a very obvious question for me, and probably for anyone listening. If my liver is accumulating all this fat and operating under all this severe oxidative stress, why doesn't my doctor catch it during my annual checkup?
Right.
Don't they run standard liver enzyme panels like ALT and AST?
They do. But this is where we really have to view legacy healthcare with a highly cynical, data-driven lens. The liver acts as a silent data sink. It accumulates lipid deposits and damage for years, sometimes decades, before those clinical blood markers sound the alarm.
Because the normal reference ranges for those liver enzymes are based on modern populations.
Yep.
And modern populations are already fundamentally sick and compromised by metabolic syndrome.
Precisely. The goalposts have moved. Over 50% of patients with active damaging fatty liver disease have completely normal GGT enzyme levels on a standard blood panel.
So the test gives you a false sense of security.
Exactly. Why you progress from simple fat accumulation to actual scarring and fibrosis. This is why modern diagnostics are shifting toward physical ultrasound tools. Things like FibroScan, using CIP and LSM metrics to actually see the physical fat and stiffness in the liver.
Because the blood tests are just too late to the game.
Way too late.
So if these modern foods, these massive glucose loads and stealthy fructose bombs are physically destroying our liver, stripping our energy, and crashing our metabolic baseline, why don't we just stop eating them?
Well, that points to something happening above the neck.
Right. Because this isn't an accident. Our survival wiring is being actively exploited here.
It is a profound neurochemical hijack. To understand why we can't just stop eating, we have to look at the brain's mesolimbic dopamine pathway, from the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens.
The reward center.
Exactly. Evolutionarily, this reward system was designed to give us a hit of dopamine when we found rare, energy-dense foods in nature. It was a vital survival mechanism.
Sure, finding honey in the woods or something.
Right. But today, engineered ultra-processed foods completely bypass our natural sensory feedback. They cause unnatural, massive dopamine spikes.
You know, if you're listening to this and you've ever felt guilty about finishing a whole sleeve of cookies or a bag of chips when you swore you wouldn't, this isn't a failure of your willpower.
Not at all.
The clinical research, I'm thinking of those Raclopride PET scans. They show that these hyper-palatable foods light up the exact same brain regions as cocaine and alcohol. You are fighting a highly engineered software hack.
And just like with narcotics, when your brain is repeatedly subjected to extreme dopamine surges, it initiates a neuroadaptive defense mechanism.
How does it defend itself?
It tries to protect itself by downregulating your D2 dopamine receptors. You develop a chronic hedonic deficit.
Meaning you need more and more of the ultra-processed food just to feel a normal baseline of pleasure.
Exactly. And we can actually track this progression through 5 specific stages of addiction.
Okay, let's break those down. What does that actually look like in a person's life? How do you go from, just enjoying junk food to a full-blown biological addiction?
Well, think about how it starts. Stage 1 is pre-addiction. In the early stages, it's just heightened anticipatory spikes. You see a commercial or walk past a bakery, and you get a massive spike of wanting.
But your satiety signals still work at that point.
Yes, at this point, your physical satiety signals still mostly work. You can eat, and you eventually feel full. But as the consumption continues, you hit stage 2, early addiction.
And what happens there?
Localized neuroinflammation begins, and that D2 downregulation starts.
That's where the stress eating kicks in, right? You're eating to fix the deficit.
Exactly. Then you move to stage 3, the mid-stage. Here, that persistent reward deficit starts actively overriding your natural physical satiety signals.
The urge to seek the dopamine hit becomes louder than the physical feeling of your stomach stretching.
You've got it, which leads right into stage 4, late addiction. Here, the structural connection between the reward center of your brain and your prefrontal cortex actually starts to weaken.
And the prefrontal cortex is your logic and impulse control center. So you're literally losing the wiring to say no.
Right. You lose impulse control, and you might even experience physical withdrawal symptoms if you don't get the food.
And the final stage.
Stage 5 is end stage.
Yeah.
The metabolic damage is so profound that you become completely blind to satiety hormones. There is a hormone called leptin, secreted by your fat cells. Its entire job is to tell your brain, hey, we have plenty of stored body fat, we don't need to eat.
But because of the chronic inflammation and the constantly high insulin levels we talked about earlier, the brain can't hear the leptin anymore.
No. It develops total leptin resistance. So the brain literally thinks the body is starving to death, despite the presence of severe obesity. It actively drives you to consume more calories.
So it locks the individual into a terrifying, entirely compulsive cycle.
Yes. And if we follow the thread of that chronic hyperinsulinemia, that constant high-velocity glucose and insulin environment required to feed this addiction, we find it connects to the most devastating systemic glitch of all.
Yeah, this is a heavy pivot, but we have to go there. We're talking about cellular malignancy, the Sugar-Cancer Nexus.
It's vital we discuss this. We have to step back to the 1920s, to a discovery called the Warburg Effect.
Right, Otto Warburg.
Yes. He observed that tumor cells fundamentally alter how they process energy. Even when they have plenty of oxygen available, they stop using their energy factories efficiently and switch to a very primitive form of energy production called aerobic glycolysis.
Wait, let me make sure I have this. Normal cells produce, what, like 36 ATP from one glucose molecule?
Correct.
But this primitive pathway only yields 2 ATP. So normal cells are like highly efficient hybrid cars, squeezing maximum energy out of every drop of fuel. But cancer cells switch their engines to become massive gas guzzlers.
That's a great way to visualize it. Because this process is so incredibly inefficient, cancer cells require 10 to 100 times more glucose to survive and multiply compared to a normal cell.
That's wild. 10 to 100 times more.
They're absolutely ravenous for sugar. And the master switch that allows them to gorge on this fuel is driven by chronic insulin.
Walk me through that biochemical deep dive. How does the insulin actually help the cancer cell get all that glucose?
When you have chronic insulin spikes from eating ultra-processed foods, it activates a signaling cascade called the PI3K ACT pathway.
Okay.
This pathway acts like an overdrive signal. Normally, a cell has a protein called TXNIP, which acts like a cleanup crew to remove glucose transporters, the doors from the cell membrane, when it has had enough to eat.
But the PI3K pathway stops that.
Yes. ACT inhibits TXNIP. It shuts down the cleanup crew. This locks a specific transporter, GLUT1, onto the cell membrane. It leaves the gates wide open for continuous glucose influx.
So the doors are stuck open. Does the cell have any other defenses?
Not under these conditions. The ACT signal also activates PFK2, which forces the glycolysis pathway to run at absolute maximum velocity.
It just rips the speed limits off.
Exactly. And it triggers mTORC1, which upregulates HIF1A, turning on nearly every glycolytic enzyme. It acts as a master switch, reinforcing this ravenous cancer phenotype.
I want to pause here to be very clear, because this is crucial for you listening. We aren't saying that eating a candy bar magically mutates your DNA and gives you cancer.
No, absolutely not.
What we're saying is that if a mutated cancer cell already exists in your body, a diet high in refined starches and sugars provides both the primary growth signal, the insulin, and an infinite supply of the exact physical fuel that tumor desperately needs to replicate. Is that accurate?
That is highly accurate, and it's the critical distinction. You are creating a metabolic environment that is incredibly hospitable for tumors.
You are supplying the precise physiological resources required for rapid oncogenic growth, which brings us to the realization that none of this biological manipulation is an accident.
Far from it.
The ultra-processed foods driving this aren't just unthinkingly thrown together in a kitchen. They are the result of highly sophisticated optimization. We are currently in the middle of a modern battlefield, an algorithmic arms race.
We really are.
On one side, we have algorithms designing our food to exploit us, and on the other, algorithms trying to save our health.
Let's look at the offensive vector first. Big food. The days of human taste testers sitting in a room are effectively obsolete.
Oh, completely.
Today, global food conglomerates use deep machine learning to map human biology. Take a platform like Gastrograph AI.
I read about this, and it is terrifying.
It uses neural networks to map human sensory feedback across a 24-spoke wheel into what they call an infinite dimensional Hilbert space.
They aren't just trying to make a chip taste a little saltier. They integrate your demographics, the ambient barometric pressure, the noise level where you'll likely be eating, your GPS coordinates.
Yes, all of it.
All to predict exactly what flavor profile will hook you on a biological level.
Exactly. Major food corporations like IBM and McCormick, partnering up, are using artificial intelligence to review millions of data points. They generate flavor profiles 3 times faster than human developers ever could.
And the goal is always the same, right?
To algorithmically optimize the bliss point, maximize dopamine release, completely bypass natural satiety signals. They know what you will crave before you even take a bite.
But there is a defensive vector here. Health tech, predictive AI is now being deployed to mitigate this exact metabolic dysfunction.
Yes, thankfully. Machine learning models are evaluating the curves from continuous glucose monitors.
The CGMs.
Right. By looking at the postprandial glucose response, the exact shape of your blood sugar curve after a meal, these algorithms can detect muscle insulin resistance years before your standard HbA1c blood test at the doctor's office ever triggers an alarm.
That's incredible. And they're doing this for liver health too, right?
Yes. Support vector machine algorithms can predict the presence of NAFLD from basic lab panels with 98% accuracy. It completely bypasses the diagnostic lag of those legacy liver enzymes we talked about.
What I find truly fascinating about this defensive side is the corporate realization of the data. The legacy medical establishment moves incredibly slowly. But self-funded employers...
Oh, they are doing the math.
Right. The companies who pay directly for the dialysis, the cardiovascular surgeries, the stroke rehabilitations caused by their employees' metabolic diseases.
It's pure economics for them. They are realizing the immense financial drain of metabolic illness.
It's a bizarre reality. Your employer might actually have more financial incentive to fix your metabolic health than your own doctor does.
It is bizarre, but it's true. Companies are implementing these low-carb interventions using the data from continuous monitors, and they are seeing massive returns.
We're talking up to 30% reductions in healthcare premiums.
And massive savings per employee, around $1,500 in some cases. They are realizing that fixing the dietary input is vastly cheaper than funding a lifetime of disease management.
It transforms a compounding corporate liability back into a productive, healthy human asset.
Exactly.
So, bringing it all together, we have essentially performed the autopsy on the modern metabolic crisis today. It is a fundamental mismatch. We have ancient, resource-conserving biological hardware being constantly overloaded by modern, algorithmically engineered software in the form of ultra-processed foods.
Well said.
But by understanding the 1 teaspoon metric of our blood, by recognizing the silent fructose damage happening in our liver, by mapping the dopamine hijack in our brains, and by seeing how this exact fuel feeds cancer pathways, you can actually take back your biological agency. You can choose to opt out of the algorithms.
But this raises an important question, and it's a final provocative thought I'd really like to leave you with.
Okay, let's hear it.
If Big Food's algorithms now know exactly how to trigger our evolutionary cravings with mathematical precision, and health tech's algorithms know our biological limits better than our own doctors, is human intuition regarding what we should eat effectively obsolete?
Oh.
Are we entering an era where we are entirely reliant on machines to tell us how to navigate the modern food environment safely?
That is a chilling but entirely necessary thought to leave on, because the old X-ray machine we talked about at the beginning, it is broken.
Completely broken.
The legacy system simply can't see the muddy waters of metabolic disease until the damage is already done. But through the data, the continuous monitors, the AI predictions, and fundamentally understanding our own biology, we are finally building a better machine to see the truth. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. For all the clinical studies, the data, and the frameworks we discussed today, make sure to check the show notes.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit DJAMGAMIND.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.